forward to the
It's
cloud.
like a lab and like they're gonna like talk to us about how they find.
There's someone on the Zoom.
It's
Oh,
like
that's you.
lung cancer.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes.
We'll see.
They're still like getting
What's your
FDA.
name?
A jock.
I'm Helen. I think we were at the vision board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is Valerie.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Valerie. What major are you? I know you're pre-med.
Yeah, I
Yes.
graduated last spring.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
exciting. Congratulations.
No, you're fine.
Last
Yeah.
spring.
Yeah.
You're fine.
I'm just living the post-grad life right now.
Oh, yes.
I know you
Are
work
you
on
like in
complicated
like a semester? Or are you taking classes?
okay.
That's what I mean.
Let me,
No, I finished all
and
my
if you need
prereqs
to
as well,
Yes.
so right now
pass
it's
those
my
out. So,
experiences, I guess.
all right, well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
For our very intimate discussion on the power of LinkedIn, networking, but also more importantly, especially medicine that I think is sometimes overlooked, from being general to all the specialties that can occur outside of it, and that is internal medicine. So we have Dr. Afaf Osman of Huntsman Cancer Institute and University of Utah. We also have Chief People Officer at University of Utah, Ms. Ema Houston. Now, full length in bios, I will let them share more because it's very long and I didn't bring enough note cards for all of them. But I'm happy that you're able to come. I hope we're testing out a new place to actually do our specialty nights. We did one in UVU that Helen went down there to go, or no, I think you went for, yeah, you were there for
I was
radiation
there,
oncology. Gave her a ride back that night. So that was, I was like, oh, wow. But I love her interest in always pursuing like, well, maybe I could consider this, maybe I can consider this.
That's awesome.
And that's what this is all about. You know, med school is very fast when all of you get in, and I want you to be armed with as much knowledge as possible when choosing a specialty. So without further ado, I'm gonna have Ms. Houston come up and start us off. And I'm gonna look out for the food. Feel free to help yourselves for drinks over here. And if anyone comes in online, although there isn't anyone right now, this will be recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel.
Great, excellent. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, like what Dr. Richard Ferguson has said, my name is Ema Houston, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and the Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Utah. And so I came on board 2.5 years ago in the middle of COVID. I was working for Salt Lake County government in the mayor's portfolio as the Chief Diversity Officer for Salt Lake County government. And the University of Utah knocked on my door and said, can you come and have a conversation with us about what you're doing at the university, at Salt Lake County? And I said, well, what you offering? That's what I said, what you offering? And so I had a conversation with the Vice President of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. They convinced me that I should be doing work of EDI at the University of Utah. So I am there for about 2.5 years now, after being at the county for 18 years. In the mayor's portfolio for 4 years. So I say that to talk about what does networking mean and why is it important to network with individuals. And so we're just going to talk about what it means to network and how you also network, how you connect with individuals to do the work that you do and to make the connections that you also need to make. So greetings, my name is Intentional. My name is Intentional. When we introduce ourselves, we usually say, my name is Emma. And we stop at our first name. There could be 3 other Emmas in the space. And so when we say our first and last name, we're leaving the mark that we are intentional about who we are. So I always encourage individuals, even when, if Dr. Richard Ferguson calls me, I will call him back and say, this is Ema Houston. First and last names are so important. So when we're talking about that networking component, how do you introduce yourself? How do you leave that impression? How do you let people know that you are here for a reason, that you show up, and your name is how you show up? So when we're talking about what that looks like, I encourage you to always say your first and last name. Even with people that you know, say your first and last name. And one of the things is that names are so important. And even though we may have names that may be to me, difficult to pronounce, I try my very best. I repeat it, so that I can get a clear pronunciation of those names. So what I'm saying is that your name is very important when you're in there. Using your personal relationships with people in order to network as well. And on this particular presentation, I'm going to show you some pictures of how I made some networking connections and where it took me to the next level. So even though you may think that your friends may not have connections, your friends have connections. They absolutely have connections. Last night I was at the Rose Wagner Performing Arts. They were doing a screening of The Right to Read, and it's a LeVar Burton production, and Jenny McKenzie, who is local here, who does screenings and productions as well. And as I took my seat, I was sitting next to Amy Redford. Does anybody know who Amy Redford is? Okay, let's say Robert Redford. Anybody know who Robert Redford is? I'm in a different generation, aren't I? I'm in a different generation. So Robert Redford's daughter and I was sitting in the same space. And as we began talking about the film and the things that we do, we were talking about my work that I do with equity, diversity, and inclusion. She said, that's very interesting. Maybe we should talk a little bit deeper about what that means. So that when you show up in spaces, when you introduce yourself, and you give a little bit about who you are, you never know who you're sitting next to. So that is the important part of making those connections as well. So who's in your network? Who's in your network? Who's in your network?
You guys.
Okay, Dr. Richard Ferguson is in your network, okay? So let me ask you this question. Who are your top 5 influencers? Who are the top 5 people that if you needed to go to get information, that you needed some advice, you could easily give one of them a call? Your top 5 influencers, whether it's your family member, whether it's a professor, whether it's your best girlfriend, your best guy friend, who are your top 5 influencers that you would go to have a conversation with? Have you thought about who your circle is? Who you put yourself
Well, it
in
depends
spaces
on
with?
like what kind of question it is, I think,
Okay.
for me. So I have a friend who like knows everything Utah.
Okay.
So that who I would go to if I have a question about a restaurant or like,
Okay,
I don't know.
people who have lived here that
Yeah.
know about Utah, they're in your circle of influences.
Yeah,
Okay.
or like, I don't know where to get the best ski boots or whatever. So
Okay.
that one person is for that.
Okay. So learning about the community that you live in, you have someone in your circle of influence that you know you could go to. Absolutely.
She knows everyone,
That you could go to. Okay, so if you wanted to ask about financial security, financial wealth, that you have someone in your circle of influences that you could have that conversation with. Does anyone know who Scott Anderson is? President of Zions Bank here in Utah? Okay, Richard and I go in the same circle. So I mentioned Scott because he was at the event last night.
Okay.
And as I'm walking to just go get my seat, he stops me and says, we need to have lunch. I'm saying, Scott, I'm here to see a movie. Why do we need to go have lunch? Because the information that is going out with equity, diversity, and inclusion is under attack. And Scott is very pro. He is an advocate. He is an ally. And so the president of Zions Bank stops me to say, we need to have conversation because I know the work that you do is a passion for me as well. So even though you may be at a movie screening, you never know who's in the room
Right.
that you can make those connections with. Okay? So who's in your network? And so the art of networking, arrive early. If you're at an event, arrive early. If you're going to a screening, arrive early, because then you can assess the room to see who's walking into the space. And the simple way of understanding who's in the space is you walk up and introduce yourself. Simple as that. You walk up and introduce yourself. Introduce yourself, your first and your last name. So you get a chance to see who is coming into that space. Business cards. I know business cards are electronic now. I have all kind of little apps on my phone to share my business card. How readily do you have your business card available on your phone? You simply let them scan it, boom, they got your contact information. So be sure that you have that as well. Volunteer for the theme. How many of you volunteer for something? You volunteer, and this is when you volunteer for the activity or the event, you get to see the list of who's coming. You have direct access to everyone who's going to be at that event, and they're going to come to you to ask questions. Where is this? Where is that? How do I get this? So when you volunteer for the thing, you have now put yourself in a space where other people are going to know who you are. They're going to know who you are on that part, okay? Give yourself a specific number. How many of you, when you go into an event, you sit with the people you know?
Yeah.
You sit with the people you know.
Kind of natural.
You sit with the people you know. I was invited to be on a panel at Chevron. And there were 6 of us there. Dr. Richard Ferguson was there. And I knew all of the panel people. And all the panel people sat together, right, Dr. Ferguson? I took my meal and went and sat with people who work at Chevron. And they said to me, why are you sitting with us? I say, I know those folks, but I don't know you. And so 6 other people then knew who I was. I knew who they were. I knew about their passions, what they do at Chevron, and I left with 5 new people that I can call on if I need something. So when you think about where you go and who you sit with people that you don't know. Sit with people, choose 3 people that you want to meet at an event. Walk up to, it doesn't have to be a long conversation. You simply walk up, you introduce yourself, you have conversation. I see that you went first for the dessert. I love eating dessert first as well. Let's talk about your favorite, whatever the conversation is, and then you can get into your business aspect of it. But just make it a point to meet 3 people. Now, the thing is, you all are the experts in what you do. You are the expert. So if you were to do a networking conversation, you want to get people together, you are the expert. So I want you to just simply own that. We're going to talk about, what's your field of study?
Hematology.
Hematology?
Mm-hmm.
You are the expert.
Here.
Clearly, you are the expert. So if you were to gather individuals to say, let's talk about this and the impact and the effects, you can bring people, a small group, and just have a conversation. So if you are an expert on gardening, I'm going to bring people together. We're going to talk about gardening. I am the expert. I am the expert, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. So when you're talking about how you are networking, consider yourself the expert on any topic that you would like to have conversation. Follow up. Now, the thing is that whenever I get a hard copy business card, on the back side, I write the event's name and the date so that I can remember that I met Dr. Richard Ferguson on March 15th at the opening of the gala. And then when I get back to my office, I simply send him an email and said, it was a pleasure meeting you. Hopefully our paths will continue to cross. Simple as that. It doesn't have to be a long follow-up. It just have to be, I acknowledge you. I want you to remember our conversation. Hopefully our paths will continue to cross. So social media, this is the reason that Dr. Ferguson asked me to have conversation with you. You all have social media platforms. You have all of that, right?
You're on one right now.
Social media platforms, okay, you have that. And how do you best use that? How do you best use those social media platforms? Because what we do know is that in this age of technology, if you are applying for a position, if you're even applying to be part of an organization, people will want to know, tell me your social media platforms, and they will search you. So anything you post on there, if you don't want potential employees to hear, to see, to read about, be selective. Be very selective of what you post or how you make comments or how you respond. So you are protecting your reputation. You're protecting your reputation. How many of you have a mentor? How many of you are a mentor? Okay, so you are helping someone else navigate their space on what they want to do as well. So understanding how important that is also, we gotta admit someone. And remember, I took the clicker out, so we gotta use this one. I should pay more attention to that. Thank you. Thank you. So sharing your skills, but also learning how to listen to others as well. And when you think about being a mentor, I got an email from a professor at the University of Utah. And this professor said to me, I would like for you to be my mentor. And I thought to myself, but you are a professor, you've got all kind of letters behind your name, you are credentialed in this and that. So you never know who is watching you, who is looking at a skill that they may be lacking in, that you can help them develop. So of course I said yes. Oh, sure, let's do this together. So when you think about mentors and mentees, think about what you do that other people are watching as well. Did we do something?
I can just click it for you. Oh, no, it's not.
Should be fine.
Okay. So expanding your lane, what does that even mean? I have a core group of sister friends, of guy friends, and if I said to you that all of my girlfriends are African-American women, I would have a very narrow lane. That would be the only influence that I have. So when I'm saying expand your lane, it means that you should have individuals that you can have conversation with from different backgrounds, from different demographics, from different languages, from different cultures, from different economic statuses, you should just have a wealth of individuals who are part of your lane that gets wider and wider and wider. So first impressions, when you walk into a space, you know that someone has made eye contact with you, and in 30 seconds, they have measured you up. They're going to, based on their lived experiences, they're going to expect you to behave a certain way. So when you're talking about meeting individuals, how do you present yourself? It's always first and last name. Always first and last name. You have made an impression just by doing that. How do you describe yourself? How do you describe yourself? Are you a storyteller to say, I am Emma Houston. I am the daughter of Ida and Norman Robertson. I was born in Dallas, Texas. I have 4 sisters and 2 brothers. And as my mother was teaching us life lessons, mother said, stay away from people with tattoos. People with tattoos are bad people. Anybody here got a tattoo?
No.
I got a tattoo. I have a tattoo. I had to explain to mother why I have a tattoo, but I do have a tattoo. And when I'm saying describe yourself, if you have now heard that I have a tattoo, the question is, what kind of tattoo you got, Miss Emma? Where is it, Miss Emma? Why did you get a tattoo? So you want to engage me in conversation. So when you're talking about describe yourself, who are you? Who are you? So that someone will remember who you are and want to engage further with you. What are your skills? What are your soft skills? What are your hard skills? Are you a people person? Are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Do you balance both of them in between? What are your skills? What is your top asset that you know if someone needed you to do A, B, and C, they would call you first? Do you understand what your skills are and how do you utilize those? LinkedIn profiles. Who has a LinkedIn profile? Okay, excellent. I'm going to raise my hand as well. How often do you post on your LinkedIn profile?
0. I think I've never posted.
Zero. Okay.
Every day.
Every day. Oh my gosh.
Every day. Oh, okay.
Extreme.
This is where you tell your professional story.
Yeah.
This is where you tell your professional story. I'm going to show you. Oh, no. Let's see. I'm going to show you a thing or two as far as LinkedIn profiles are concerned. You may I don't know if you all recognize any of these people on here. We got John Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
We got President.
Biden, yeah.
We got
Wow.
Dalai Lama. And this is me on the steps of the Lincoln
Oh
Memorial.
my gosh. That's awesome.
And let me tell you, I made all of this stuff, these connections, because someone came onto my LinkedIn profile and said, will you do this? Will you come and meet John Lewis? Yes, I said yes. President, he was vice president. President Biden is coming to talk about the moonshot, the cancer at Huntsman. He's got it. Would you come? I'll come. The Dalai Lama is visiting. Would you? Mr. Huntsman can't go to accept an award in Washington. Can you go for him? Off my LinkedIn profiles. Off my LinkedIn profiles. So when you talk about how can this elevate your professional story, you got to post. You got to respond. When someone posts something that you say, oh, that's a good story. Oh, yeah, I need to follow that. You make a comment about that and how it may have impacted you or how you may agree to that. And someone is going to call you and say, would you? From day one. Is anyone familiar with From Day One? They were here this past week. They are an international company that travels from state to country, and they contact individuals in those particular communities to say, will you be on a panel? Will you present? Will you show? Will you share? So they contacted me off my LinkedIn profile and said, we're going to be in Utah this week. They were here this week. We would like for you to be on a panel to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. What is the University of Utah doing? How are they hiring people? How are they creating opportunities for success? How are they eliminating barriers? I simply said yes. And so I put this one up here because one of the things is that, as you can see, where they're going. And it talks about, there was some empowering healthcare presentations, pivotal healthcare presentations. So when you look at this, and it's on your LinkedIn, if your profile is out there, they can simply say, let me just Google who's in Salt Lake City, who does this work, and let me call them to see if they'd be interested. Now, keep in mind, they did not pay me, but they provided me the opportunity to be in front of people. Which is a ripple effect of how you elevate your professional level. I'm gonna go back a couple of slides because I did skip that one. So what makes a good LinkedIn profile? You know, you can Google anything. I put the link at the bottom. You can Google anything to create the profile that you want, but it tells your personality. Who are you? Who are you? It talks about, and it adds credibility to your skills. So you're developing trust there. Because if you post something on your profile, people who follow you are gonna make a comment. And so when you have those followers, it's saying, oh, they've got skills. We can probably trust this person. And it also shows what you can do for others. And it helps you get found, absolutely. So if you are not posting, if you just start out once a month posting or making a comment on a post, you will be found. Okay? And it gets people to act. I am not seeking to go anywhere. I got a call from an organization in Europe to say, we're doing this workshop. We would like for you to come and present. Yes. That's the answer. Yes, you figure out the how after you give them the yes, because they will give you the details. Yes, I'll do that for you. Yes, I will do that for you. And that develops your skills, that develops your confidence as well. So let's just get back to those slides there. Okay. That's all I got for you today.
It's awesome.
That's all I got.
What you take away from this is if you don't spend any time on LinkedIn, but you spend more time on, Instagram, and I think you're really not representative of the Facebook generation or Snapchat. But the thing is, you are, budding professionals.
Yes.
And having a presence now is important. Building it now. There are several NORDA, College of Osteopathic Medicine students that have LinkedIn profiles. And there are several I can think of right now that are active on it. Deshaun Ure, I don't know if you have met him, he's a second year. He posted when he goes to a conference. That leads to people in the specialty he would like to pursue looking for this young man. There are residency program directors that are more likely to be there, but not gonna be associated with your mom's friends on Facebook, right? Facebook's more family. Now, mind you, there's some professional contacts on there, But that's what LinkedIn is. Now, I'm not saying you need the premium version. You don't need to pay money to be able to have this type of access. And then you get people that will validate and verify your skills. So even though you're pre-med, but many of you all have jobs. You can put a job in there, it'll give you a title. Just for an example, and what kind of spurred me to bring in Ms. Houston here for this talk is just this past week, I was trying to coordinate with does anyone know Ola? He's a third year at University of Utah School of Medicine. So he, through one of my LinkedIn contacts, was reached out. So one of my LinkedIn contacts, when I did a Beacon Diagnostics presentation on healthcare and racism, they saw him on Pulse, which is a magazine that's done by the EDI from University of Utah School of Medicine. So they saw his article, then they saw him on LinkedIn because he had a LinkedIn presence, and then they saw that I had posted about him on LinkedIn. So just through that connection, they said, would you and your White Coats for Black Lives organization present to us at Beacon Diagnostics? We will pay you. Now he's immediately, often, presenting in the same professional scope as I had to this international company, him and two other students, and they got paid for it. So that he's going to post about that on LinkedIn. That'll lead to another connection. And he's not even a doctor yet. So don't think that it's necessarily a waste of time. If anything, LinkedIn's a better use of one's time. If you're spending any time on your phone or social media, a LinkedIn present. And also there's tons of opportunities to learn on LinkedIn. They have free courses there. All right, so I'd recommend anyone that has LinkedIn, if you don't, friend Miss Houston tonight.
Absolutely.
All right.
Awesome. And the thing is that when you have individuals in your circle of influence, if I can't do something, I know others who have that skill, and I will refer to them. Because what I do know is that if you are successful, I am successful. It takes nothing away from me to help you be successful. So when you think about, if I can make this connection, then maybe someone is going to be upset with me. When we're talking about elevating all that you do, it's us helping one another. So if you need something, I am a go-to person. I am a go-to person. I know a few people in the community. So if you need something, how can I help navigate that space for you? And LinkedIn is definitely a place. People will call, I'm surprised that I get so many requests to do things. I really am.
I've had 2 job offers just in the last quarter.
Yes.
Through LinkedIn.
Through LinkedIn.
And I said no, because I'm not ready to move on. But that will happen, especially if you're, you recently graduated, right? And you're applying to med school. So you probably have to have some form of employment while becoming competitive, either laboratory work or working with a life sciences company like Ionique Sciences. They will find you on there, or you can reach out to them. They will post often positions that may seem unpaid, but then, they just had someone and became paid. She's now in med school. I met her. I think her name was, I think it was Samantha. And she actually was at an event for our outdoor fitness day. Helen was there. And she was at the Ionique Clinical Sciences table, met me, also came to the dinner when Ionique sponsored that. I reviewed her, knew of her on the admissions committee when she applied to med school. Probably gave I can't say it, but she probably got a very favorable mark. She networked unknowingly. And also she also liked everything that I posted related to BPOU on LinkedIn. Did she know I was on the admissions committee? No. Is she going to school of medicine? No, but she's going to do. Which I think is, I'm not gonna say it's a better school, but in some ways. But anyhow, any questions from Ms. Houston?
Any questions, thoughts, comments? Yes?
I have trouble with keeping connections. So I'll be able to get to know people when I'm at an internship or something. But then once I leave, is LinkedIn a good way to keep the connection going?
Keep a connection going when you leave, when you've been in an intern position?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it's just simple. Listen, although you may be leaving, how do you want to stay connected with the individuals?
I don't know.
Okay, because some people you don't want to stay connected with. So that would be your decision to say, I'm leaving, let's stay in contact, here's my personal email. You can do that as well. Is that the question? Was that the question?
Yeah, or like
Information?
a good way to like keep the connection going.
Keep the connection going. This is one of the things that I do with my team. It would be like 5 o'clock, we're getting off from work. I will send an email and say, listen, I'm heading to Rio Grande. I'm gonna be on the patio. I'm going to be eating something, whatever I'm gonna be eating. Join me if you like.
Mhm.
You could do that. You
Okay.
could just send an email to whoever you have previously worked with in the interim position. Listen, I'm gonna be at Gracie's. They've got live music tonight. Meet me there. Just send an open invitation out and see who shows up, and then still build that connection as well.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Eddie, I see you're
You'd be
online.
surprised who shows up. You'd be surprised. Because people are needing that connection as well. And sometimes those spur of the moment events are much more important than something that's been scheduled for months to do it. So just send a random, I'm gonna be here, I'd love to see you, come out.
Eddie, did you have a question?
No, no questions. I'm just listening, and this is really helpful because I have to. I haven't really created a LinkedIn. I need to work on mine after listening to this. I really need to get working on that. So I really appreciate this presentation.
Good, good. Well, you're gonna learn a bit. And so Eddie is one of our stellar third years and one of the first mentees with BPOU. He was integral in, a lot of my really early events, and he's a future pediatrician, actually already in the EPATH program for pediatrics residency here at the U. But you are going to eventually work with internal medicine colleagues, so be aware of that. You'll be passing them in hallways, so don't tune out. There's still plenty to learn here. All right, so we have Dr. Osman up next, and she will be, and you can use this clicker here.
Sure.
And for anybody that's on Instagram, we're into part 2 now for internal medicine.
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm Afaf Osman. I am an internal medicine doctor. I'm actually a hematologist, which is one of the branches of it. Many different branches or subspecialties from internal medicine. So I'm just gonna give you kind of an overview. It's very casual, so please just join in with questions, and whenever you have a question, just jump in. So what is internal medicine? I think it's pretty hard to define it as a field. I don't know, where is the clicker?
It's not clicking anymore.
Which one is it? Is it this? I can just click here, it's fine. I don't have that many slides, so. Oh, actually, we had some introductions first.
Okay, that was me. It works.
Okay, well, let's do some introductions first, because I actually don't know all of you. So if any of you guys can just give us a quick introduction of who you are and what do you do and what you want to do in the future. You want to start?
Yeah, of course. My name is Valerie Fernandez. In terms of origin, I'm from the Los Angeles area, but I've lived in Utah for a few years now. Education, I just graduated with my bachelor's in health society and policy last spring. And for occupation, I work as a blood gas technician at the U's main hospital, and I actually work at an overflow homeless shelter as well in Mill Creek. So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
That's a good summary.
I'm Helen. I'm a 4th year undergrad at the University of Utah. I major in health anthropology and minor in Arabic. Right now I'm working as an intern at VOTR, which is a nonprofit focusing on voter registration in healthcare settings. And in the future, I'm open to any medical specialty, but I really like psychiatry.
I actually speak Arabic, so if you want someone to
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome actually.
train with.
Stories.
That's my mother language, so.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Niyar Nyandagaro, and I'm originally from Tanzania, Africa. I came here when I was 5. I'm currently majoring in health society and policy. I'm a 3rd year undergrad at the U. And my current occupation is I'm a medical assistant at the St. Mark's Family Medicine residency program. Yeah, so that's what I do Monday through Thursday.
Yes, my name is Ajaka Rock. Sorry, I have a cold, so I'm kind of don't sound great. I'm originally from South Sudan. I came here when I was 3 years old, and I've lived in Salt Lake my whole life. I'm a 4th year undergrad studying biology at the University of Utah, and I currently work as a undergrad research assistant at the Rudder Lab on the medical school campus. So.
That's awesome. I'm from Sudan.
Okay.
So there's a connection there as well. That's great. So that's awesome. And I think you guys, do you want to introduce yourself? They know you, so I'm just
Everybody
gonna
knows
skip. Actually, you want to tell us more about you, or you already?
I got a tattoo, I'm just saying.
Well, that's great. Well, it's good to know everybody. So what is internal medicine? I got this from the American Medical, the AMA, and it's just, what they say is internists are physicians, specialists uniquely trained to apply scientific knowledge to the care of adults across the spectrum from health to complex illness. So it's a very, very general, right? So I mean, that's kind of the nature of internal medicine. It's a kind of a very general field. It's very hard to define what an internist is. Internist is someone who will diagnose an illness, who will treat an illness. You know, we are not surgeons, so we don't perform surgeries to begin with. We take care of adults. So we don't take care of kids, pediatricians. So we're not pediatricians, we don't take care of kids. You know, we're not taking care of pregnant people most of the time, and we're not really delivering babies either. So kind of maybe think about it as what it's not. Maybe it's not surgery, it's not OB-GYN, it's not pediatrics. Under internal medicine, it's kind of an umbrella of many different subspecialties that go under it. And it's different from family medicine because it's more involved with the hospital setting and the inpatient setting than family medicine. So we can kind of talk a little bit more about that as well. Do you want to go to the next slide? So like I said, it's a very broad specialty. It's a 3-year specialty, and there are multiple subspecialties that go under internal medicine. So my subspecialty is hematology oncology. And the reason hematology and oncology are tied together is historical, but they really don't have a lot to do with each other. Oncology is the study of cancers, tumors, and hematology is the study of the blood, basically. And you know, you can have tumors in the blood, which is what I do. So I'm a hematologist who specializes in blood cancers, and more specifically in leukemias, actually. Oncology looks at the tumors elsewhere in the body, sort of the breast cancer and the colon cancer and so on. But every organ you can think of, there's kind of an internal medicine subspecialty for, almost. So if you think about the heart, there's the cardiologists. They focus on the heart, basically. If you think about the joints, there's rheumatology. And this is me just simplifying it very much, these subspecialties, right? If you think about the kidneys, there are the nephrologists. If you think about the lungs, there are the pulmonologists. Critical care is for the ICU when people are very sick and they're in the ICU. The critical care doctors are taking care of them. If you think about infections, then you have infectious disease. You think about your stomach and colon and your gastrointestinal system. There's gastroenterology, allergy and immunology, endocrinology. And then there's a new emerging field that I really wanted to also mention, which is hospital medicine. And then, of course, internal medicine also includes primary care, especially during residency. A lot of us will go through primary care clinics. So your primary care doctor could be a family physician, but they could also be an internist. So a lot of people will just do 3 years of internal medicine, and then they'll go see patients in the outpatient clinic as their primary care physician. And in that setting, you're taking care of their complex medical problems, their blood pressure, their diabetes, their vaccination, their preventative health care. So I feel like people always kind of think about internal medicine subspecialties, but really a big part of internal medicine is the primary care as well. And this is not all the subspecialties that are under internal medicine. This is just kind of a shortened list of the ones that people more commonly go into. But there are other subspecialties. There's geriatrics medicine, which focuses on taking care of the elderly, basically. In hospital medicine, hospitalists are kind of a new breed of medicine that's becoming more and more common. And what they do is they take care of patients hospitalized in the hospital, admitted to the hospital. Typically, they don't have an outpatient clinic, right? Whereas all these other specialties, except for critical care, most of these other specialties, we will see patients in the clinic and we will see patients admitted to the hospital as well. And just to focus a little bit more on my field, the hematology oncology. I'm very subspecialized within my field in the terms that I see one type of cancer only. But in terms of my board certification or what I was trained to do, I was trained to treat all kinds of cancers, but also to treat blood diseases such as like bleeding diseases, clotting diseases, things like sickle cell disease, things like thalassemias, anemias, and so on. So again, it's kind of a broad subspecialty. And then in terms of sort of looking at practice setting, where can you practice internal medicine? So we talked about outpatient practice and we talked about clinic practice. And then you have sort of different settings of practice in terms of academic practices, private practices, hospital-based practices, people who have their own, they own their own practice. So standalone physician-owned practices. So there are many different settings. After doing my fellowship, I went into academic medicine. So that's the practice that I'm most familiar with, honestly. And interestingly, during training, we don't actually go to private practice. So I'm not actually as familiar with the private practice because I kind of grew up in the academic system from the beginning to now. But the things that I enjoy about the academic system is that I'm very focused on a small subset of diseases. So I can really become an expert in these subsets of diseases. And that's how I think about academic medicine any of these subspecialties, is you kind of become an expert in a small subset of diseases that I see over and over. And then I'm also able to do research, which is very exciting for me. So if we go to the next slide, I thought I would just share with you why I did internal medicine, because I feel like that's the best way to learn about the subspecialties and maybe, other people have other reasons, but this is my experience of why I became an internal medicine doctor. First of all, I love problem solving, and I feel like there's a lot of sort of that problem solving, figuring out a disease presentation. Someone comes in with a set of symptoms, and you have to put them together and reach a diagnosis. So that's, to me, I love that aha moment of figuring out what the problem is, right? Someone coming in with so many different symptoms, different complaints, and then you put it together with the blood tests that they've done, you put it together with the imaging that you've done, put it together with other information, and you kind of come to a diagnosis. So there's a lot of that in internal medicine. I like thinking about pathophysiology of diseases and how they develop. So that's another part of it. So there's a lot of thinking involved with internal medicine. A little bit more thinking than actually like procedures or doing things. The other important part of why I really like internal medicine is that there's continuity of care. So that's pretty special to the internal medicine field. And that means that you're seeing patients over a long period of time. So you're their internists, so they're coming back to you over and over months, years, right? And then you get to know them, you get to form much stronger bonds with them than if you're seeing them, once or twice ever in their lives, right? And then you become way more effective in changing their life because of that bond and trust that builds up with the continuity of care. So I really like that kind of bond with patients and their families. I enjoy that. And I like listening to people. I like people's stories. So there's a lot of that in internal medicine. So that's a big part for me. And then there's lots of options for fellowship training post-residency. So the residency is usually 3 years, and then you really have all of these different subspecialties that you can go into. And some people have a really hard time picking between these subspecialties. I had that. I really liked rheumatology. I really liked cardiology. I really liked hematology. So it kind of gives you a big choice of subspecialties to go into. In terms of procedures, there's some subspecialties of internal medicine that have more procedures than others. things like gastroenterologists who do endoscopies and colonoscopies, cardiologists, actually, they're building up more and more of their procedure repertoires in cardiology. You know, they're doing stents, they're changing valves now, people's valves through these minimally invasive procedures in cardiology. So the procedural aspect of internal medicine is growing, I would say, in specific subspecialties though. Hematology, oncology is not really a procedural field. So I don't really ever kind of like, right now, I don't really ever do any procedures, actually. I haven't done any for 2.5 years, which is okay with me. That's kind of what I want is more the thinking and, you know, prescribing medications and thinking about problems and so on. So it's definitely, you know, less procedural than, you know, surgery or OB, obstetrics or so on. And then for myself, another reason I chose internal medicine is I've always was interested in genomics research. So that's why I'm in academics, because I don't only see the patients, but I also get to do the research part, which to me is very exciting. And we use a lot of genomics testing in diagnosing our patients with these blood cancers, in treating patients with blood cancers, so for tailoring therapy. And at the same time, I see the patients in the clinic and I take their blood and then I work on it in the research lab. So that kind of pipeline, a translational pipeline and translating the science into the clinic is very exciting to me. And, you know, the ability to test out new medications that are just coming out from the laboratory, test them in the clinic, the ability to always kind of, there's always new science coming up, there's always new treatments coming up. And then, you know, especially in a field like cancer, right, it's a very challenging field, but it's always changing and there's always problems to solve and there's always new discoveries to make. So to me, that was a big draw for me to go into internal medicine and then go into academic medicine, where I can have both the role of being the researcher and the role of seeing patients in the clinic and then translating that bit back and forth between the clinic and the lab. So what do you need to do to become an internal medicine doctor? So you guys got the undergrad part and then you get your MD or DO degree, and then the residency is 3 years. The fellowship, most of the fellowships are between 1 year to, I think the maximum would be about 4 years. For me, I did a 3-year hematology oncology fellowship. That's usually the number of years for fellowship. Some people will sub-specialize after fellowships. So there's always an option for that. So for example, in my field, after finishing the hematology oncology fellowship, what you can do is you can do a leukemia fellowship, for example. So you specialize in it, or you can do a bone marrow transplant fellowship. So you just only do bone marrow transplants. If you do a cardiology fellowship, you could end up doing an electrophysiology fellowship where you just, all you focus on is the electricity of the heart and putting in pacemakers and putting in sort of all kinds of devices. Or if you do a gastroenterology fellowship, you could go and subspecialize in hepatology, which is taking care of the liver. Or you specialize in transplant hepatology, which is taking care of patients after they get a liver transplant. So there's a lot. So the 3 years are kind of what you need to go through, but you can do more training after that, and kind of the years of training depends on the level of subspecialty you want to do. And then a lot of fellowship programs are usually, a lot of them are combined, sort of a research and in a clinical fellowship, especially in the larger academic centers. So for me, I did 1.5 years of a clinical fellowship and 1.5 years of a research fellowship, where I focused on developing a research question and answering it. Not everybody does that. Sort of different programs will do different things.
Where did you do your program?
University of Chicago. And my medicine residency was at Johns Hopkins, which is actually one of the first medicine residency programs in the country. It's the Osler medicine residency program. So, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was a really great experience. So we can go to the next one. So I wanted to talk to you about someone who I consider an inspiring Black internist, and this is Dr. Michelle Albert. She's actually the current president of the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association is a very important and prominent association that publishes a lot of the guidelines that people go through. It trains a lot of people, it supports a lot of research. It's a very prominent organization in the field of internal medicine and in the field of cardiology. She's the first woman of color who's president of this organization. You know, a lot of these medical societies have traditionally had, you know, white men as their presidents for long periods of time. She has a very inspiring story. She was born in Guyana, and then she moved to New York, and she kind of made her way up. Her entire sort of career and portfolio and everything she did, from her research to her service, is really, really inspiring to me. So I kind of wanted to share this with you. And there's actually an article about her when she became the AHA president on the AHA page that is really inspiring to read. So this is part of that article, and this is kind of her history. So you can see that she did her internal medicine residency at Columbia University, and she was actually the chief medical resident there. And then from that, she did her cardiology fellowship at Brigham and Women, and then she became an associate professor, and then became the chair actually of cardiology at Howard University. So she's very inspiring to me. So I wanted to share that with you guys. That's my last slide. So you guys didn't have any questions. I wanted it to be like really interactive. So yeah, you have a question, Jacques.
Yeah, sorry. I wasn't sure if you were taking questions.
Yeah, I am.
You were going so fast, I think they didn't get a chance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I get so excited.
It's a
Yeah,
passion. Wow.
that was a good talk. So I'm very interested in like infectious disease medicine.
Cool, yeah.
When it comes to pathways on getting there, I know oftentimes people do like subspecialties or something after residency.
Yes.
Would you recommend doing like an internal medicine fellowship, or would you recommend maybe doing like pediatrics or something else, and then doing like an infectious disease
Yeah.
subspecialty? Like, what's the best path?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. Infectious disease is a subspecialty. You can go to it from medicine, you can go to it from pediatrics, but most people I know go to it through internal medicine. So you do your 3-year residency in internal medicine, and in your second year, you apply for fellowship programs that are infectious disease, you know, focused. And then from that, you go into your infectious disease fellowship, which the fellowship is usually 2 to 3 years. The pediatrics fellowships, I believe that they are smaller, like there's less numbers of pediatrics infectious disease specialists in the country than medicine. So if you go into medicine, then it gives you options for way more fellowship programs after you're done, just by the virtue that there's a lot. And actually internal medicine is one of these subspecialties that there's a lot of programs, you know, way more than pediatrics programs, for example. Which opens up, you know, a lot of geographic opportunities for people who want to go, you know, wherever around the country. But the ped subspecialties are more limited. And I know that because my husband is actually a pediatrician, is an pediatrics intensivist. So I know that their subspecialties are more limited. But in terms of kind of the study of infectious disease itself, I think there's a lot of overlap between the adult and the pediatrics anyways. But they are kind of like two different fields. And it also depends on why you want to do infectious disease. Is there like a specific part of it that you're?
I think it has a lot to do with like my background and coming from a place where tropical diseases are a real issue.
Yeah.
Especially like diseases like malaria, which aren't necessarily a problem in the US, but they are a lot of other places.
Dope.
Yeah, I think I think, you know, either way is fine, peds or medicine, but medicine would give you more options in terms of fellowship programs. So-
Hey, Eddie, you can state it. You can unmute yourself.
I just have kids behind me, so I wasn't sure. No, just to comment on that. That is correct. Just from what I've learned from the pediatric department, there are fewer ID or infectious disease fellowships in comparison to internal med. So if you did want to go down the route of infectious disease, I would also recommend going internal medicine first, because not only that, you also get, I feel like there's a wider population, because you have to think with pediatrics, you're only going from from birth to about 18 years. Whereas with internal med, you go from about 20 years until death, which is, I mean, you're averaging like maybe 80. So that's 6 years right there. So you have a wider breadth of patient population. And yeah, and so that's just kind of some of my insight from what I've learned from pediatrics.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I agree with that.
I would also add, I know that there's an issue for tropical disease, but just through internal medicine, and because until you spend a little bit of time with ID, and she can tell you, ID tend to focus on a very, they do the stuff that internal medicine often can't treat. And they can treat a ton of things.
Yeah, that's true.
So when you ask for internal medicine, they end up, because they're highly subspecialized for resistant bugs, or you know, sometimes you need them involved just to even request a certain drug. That means you're very narrow on what you're able to use and sometimes do. So you know a ton, but depending on if you're hospital-based versus clinic-based, you tend to sometimes see a lot of the same things. So sometimes you go into it because you'll still make a difference in many people's lives, but the variety that you think you may have in options, particularly in the U.S. healthcare system, it gets really narrow. So I as someone that consults infectious disease from the emergency room, it's often for the same stuff. It's, you know, resistant C. diff or a certain form of MRSA that came in, and that's it. And he often treats a lot of the same thing. I don't know if you want to share more.
Well, I think it also depends on what practice setting,
Yeah.
like, is it a community hospital, is it academic hospital?
Yeah.
So when I did my residency at Hopkins, we had a whole floor for HIV, just an HIV floor, right? So, and in that, there was a lot of infectious diseases that you did not see sort of like probably much in Utah, like, you know, cryptococcal, meningitis that had to get lumbar punctures daily, for example, that's very rare. So, but that was because it was kind of a major academic center where people would send, you know, patients who have HIV would be sent there, you know. So it depends on the setting. I think if you're in an academic center, you're gonna see a variety of things. The other setting where I interact a lot with infectious disease is nowadays when I'm rounding on my patients who've had chemo or who've had a stem cell transplant and their immune system is completely wiped out. You know, sometimes I just joke and I say I should be rounding with the infectious disease doctors together because my whole patient list has infections. But it's because we wipe out their immune system with the chemo and with doing the transplant. So they end up getting really rare infections. In the infectious disease team there is tremendously helpful. And then they really kind of get to use their like big minds to figure out what's going on. And they take huge histories, like you should see their note. We're always gonna look at the infectious disease note on these patients. They're asking the patients, where did you travel to? Do you have mold in your house? Did you go on a cruise and catch, you know, some Legionella from going on the cruise? So they become real detectives there. So I think that setting of practice makes a difference. And kind of like if you're in a hospital seeing, you know, a tertiary care center, sort of a center where you get sent these complex cases, you're gonna see a more breadth. Versus if you are in, you know, a community hospital where it can be
And that's where I
narrow, like you
was.
said.
So he saw what, you know, I was in a town of 40,000. So he kept seeing a lot of the same thing. But yeah, if you're at Mayo, you're going to see even more unusual associated aspects of infectious disease than probably even Hopkins, just because Mayo takes care of stuff when people often run out of where they send people.
Or University of Nebraska, where they have a biocontainment unit, for example, they have a very strong infectious disease program there.
Yes, here.
So I have a question about like balance, like how, because I love like the whole continuity of care as well as like academic medicine and like bringing like science into medicine, like you phrased it. How do you like establish that? Is it like after like fellowship and like you do that with your employer, or is that something you can start like exploring and working on during residency?
Do you mean the science part of it?
Yes, and
Yeah.
science and like research plus working with patients. Like,
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, that is a very unique career track that requires a lot of preparing for, I would say. So, I think it starts really from residency, thinking about a career, or even medical school, thinking about a career track like that. So if you are interested in becoming, we call it physician scientist, you start kind of trying to acquire skills early on. So in med school, you do research rotations, you try to be in the lab if you want to be in the lab, or if you want to do clinical research, you try to be with someone who does clinical research and end up, you try to, publish your work or present your work. And then in residency, a lot of the residencies will have sort of research electives, especially in academic centers. So you can take, 2 months or a month and work on a project that's research related. A lot of my research training came from fellowship actually, because I had that year and a half where I focused just on research. A lot of people will do another year after fellowship just to focus on learning the research, because by that time you have the clinical care pretty well set up. So you've gone through your residency, you've gone through your clinical fellowship, you know how to treat the patients in clinic. And then, the next part of it is kind of learning the research skills, right? So you do need extra time most of the time. So people either take another year after fellowship where they're seeing patients, but not as much, and they're involved in research projects with a mentor. And then some people actually do an MD PhD. Of course, that's another.
It's Dr. Cheshire.
Yeah, so that is usually 6 to 8 years program where you are becoming a physician. You're getting all the clinical stuff from an MD, but you're also working on a project and learning research skills through that project and getting a PhD. So that's one path. So MD PhDs kind of do that path, or if you just have an MD alone, then you kind of need to do the research training later on. So that's in terms of the training. And then in terms of the job, so my job, a lot of us have either like something like a 50-50. So, I do a day in clinic and the rest of the week I am working on my research, for example. Or some people will do 2 days in clinic and the rest of the week they're working on the research projects. So it kind of depends on, how much you want to do basically. And then, as you mature, then you kind of end up getting your own funding to run your own program and support your salary. So it's definitely a road that's more complicated than just simply becoming a physician alone, but I find it very fun, very engaging. And the switching between the patient care and the research really kind of keeps me very engaged. So I enjoy it a lot, and I think it's worth, the extra training that I had to go through to end up there. And it's a very unique setup, and you have very unique skills because, you're seeing the patients and you're thinking about, the molecular processes that are happening in their bodies, right? Like you're thinking about genes and proteins, and you're thinking about them on a cellular, molecular level. So I find that really, really cool. And it allows you to make, really cool advances because of that unique set of skills, right? That very few, there's not a lot of physician scientists in general. We definitely need more women, more Black people who are physician scientists, right? It's a longer road, it's a harder road. So, we definitely need more representation in that. So
We have one student, hey, Eddie, what's his name? Michael, what's Michael's last name?
I don't know him.
But we have
Atkinson, I think.
Atkins. Yeah, so we actually have a Black MD PhD student. He's in Eddie's year group. But I think they start off, they do the first 2 years, and then I think they do, I think it's like 3 years back into PhD work, and then they go back into med school again, or 4 years, and then they finish. So they don't graduate clearly. Like he's not, Eddie will graduate next
It's
year.
almost like double the time.
Yeah. But he'll come out. One of the I worked with a guy's mom. His name was Dr. Ranquilio, and he is a MD PhD. He did ophthalmology, but he was an MD PhD student. Got an opto. Now he's a retina doc in Denver. So I lot of great options that can come out, especially if you combine with research. You, of course, your mentor, Dr. Kimani, he's very heavy into research, and he wants to do even eventually more. I mean, if you leave it to Steve, he will want to do 1 day of clinic a month, and the rest is just research. Questions? This is the time.
Yeah.
So for hematology oncology, do most people like treat all blood conditions like sickle cell and then also leukemia? Or do they like specialize like you and they only do like leukemia and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that people in the community, sort of like in, private clinics or, in hospitals that are more private practice setting, have a more general hematology oncology practice where they'll see breast cancer, colon cancer, leukemias, sickle cell disease, for example, anemias, high white counts, bleeding diseases, and so on. So again, it depends on the setting, the practice setting. In academics, we are very subspecialized in small sets of diseases. But if you go out in a private practice and in community, then you will find that people are treating kind of a big range of diseases, yeah.
So does it work where like, say a family medicine physician sees a patient, they're like, oh, I don't know about this, and then they refer them to a hem-onc physician, and then they diagnose them, and then they stay with them throughout their care?
Oh yeah, that's an excellent question. Yes, we do have continuity of care. It depends on what we, if it's something like, let's say someone refers a patient to you and they have sickle cell disease, then yeah, they stay with us because they require specialist care and we see them continually. If someone has, let's say, a chronic leukemia, then they also stay with me and I see them over the years. I may not take care of their blood pressure, for example, or their diabetes. I may say, go to your primary care. Most usually I would say, go to your primary care to manage your blood pressure and manage your diabetes, for example. Because as I get more and more subspecialized, I kind of lose some of that internal medicine knowledge about, the preventative care, for example, right? Or I may say, you can go to your primary care doctor to get your vaccines, for example, while I focus on your leukemia and your disease treatment for your leukemia, for example. So we work with the primary care doctors, but we do have that continuity of care and we see patients longitudinally.
Okay, and sorry, one more question.
Please, yeah.
And for hematology like / oncology, it's a combined fellowship, right?
Yeah, and it's a historic reason why they combined it. So, they're pretty different actually. But when you, so there's something called the board exam. And the board exam is when you take that standardized examination to say that you are a subspecialist in this. So there are actually 2 different board exams for the hematology. There's a hematology board and there's an oncology board. But most fellowships will train you to do both boards. There are few programs in the country where you can do one and not the other. One of them is the University of Chicago program that I went to, where you could do just oncology board and not do hematology. And typically you will do that if you're gonna go into academics. You're gonna only see breast cancer. So you're not gonna see any more, leukemias or any other blood problems. So you're just gonna see breast cancer. So you know that and you're in a place that makes you or prepares you for that. So you just do one board. There is a lack of what we call benign hematologists or classical hematologists. So these are hematologists that only focus on non-cancer conditions, so on bleeding, clotting, on inherited hemoglobinopathies like sickle cell disease and thalassemias and things like that. These hematologists, there's actually a shortage of them in the country. So there's going to be, the American Society of Hematology is helping open up more training programs that focus only on the hematology, on what we call classical benign hematology, that doesn't involve cancer, that only involves like non-cancer blood diseases, because there's been a historic shortage in them. So they're trying to bring up more of them.
Is that because most of the people who do the fellowship go towards oncology?
Yeah. A lot of people will go towards, they're more interested in the cancer part. So there's been an effort to increase the people who actually want to do the blood. And in the European system, they're separate. So it's just in the American system that they're together. So it's interesting. It's kind of a historic thing. So, but as more, the oncology field, what I can tell you about it has been crazy growth over the past 15 years, where we went from just having kind of chemotherapy and surgery and radiation to having all these targeted therapies, immunotherapies where we harness the immune system to attack the cancers. That's the newest type of therapy that's out there now. The targeted therapies that target a specific problem in the tumor, a specific genetic mutation. So there's been a revolution in oncology, and the field has grown so much. And that's kind of one of the main reasons I went into it. So, you have a question?
Yeah, so like if you finish like an internal medicine residency like in the United States of America and you want to like practice or like do research in other countries, do you have to redo like boards in their system or does that like transfer?
I don't know about other countries. I think to do the research, you probably don't need to do any extra boards, but in order to actually work there, you may need to do some exams. I don't know, actually. It's a good question. It depends on the country, I think, too.
Yes, yeah, that's true too.
So I'm not sure about specific places.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the hospital medicine, is that being like a general internist, you don't do fellowship? Or is that like a different fellowship?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hospitalists used to not have to do extra fellowships, and a lot of them have not done fellowships. But nowadays, more recently, there's been new fellowship programs that are coming up that are called hospital medicine fellowships. I think it's a year. Like 5 to 10 years ago, most of them didn't do extra fellowships. It seems like there is a little bit of a push to do maybe an extra year they're called hospital fellowship programs. But it's not a requirement really.
So you could be a hospitalist without it?
Yeah, so far. I mean, maybe in the future it's gonna change, but right now a lot of them don't have the extra fellowship here. And a lot of people they'll finish medicine residency and then they'll do a year where they work as hospitalists while they kind of figure out what they want to do for fellowship, and then they go into a fellowship program.
Is it pretty easy to like take a couple years off and then do fellowship?
Yeah, people do that a lot, either to like boost up their CV, or because they're not sure what they want to do because there's so many fellowship programs. So, it's not a year off because most people will work because you don't want that kind of, you don't want that interruption in your CV. You'll be asked about if you didn't work. But yeah, most people will either do hospitalist or maybe they'll do primary care in that year, or maybe they'll do research in that year. So yeah, people do it all the time. So you don't have to go from residency directly to fellowship. Actually, and some of the foreign graduates actually do fellowship sometimes before doing residency. They've done residency in their home country, they do fellowship. I have a few friends who did that and then they go back and do residency. So some people even do it the other way around, but it's very uncommon. It's usually people who've done residencies elsewhere who do that, but yeah. So it's a fun subspecialty, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being a medicine resident, and you see all kinds of diseases on the medicine floors. Everything from diabetes to heart attacks to kidney failures to tumors to, all of these things kind of come through medicine initially, right? You're kind of the initial gatekeeper that people come through you, and then you kind of like put them out to different subspecialties. So the other thing is if you like a systems approach to patient care, then usually you're taking care of different systems. So it's not usually one problem. As an internist, it becomes when you're a subspecialist like me, a hematologist or a gastroenterologist, then you're taking care of one system. But as a general internist, you're often taking care of many different systems in the body, and all these systems of course will interact, right? And sometimes you're consulting with many different subspecialists and you're kind of synthesizing all of these different consultants' recommendations and delivering them to the patient in a very complex manner. And that's a lot of this hospitalist medicine. A lot of it is kind of delivering care to patients who have multiple complex problems. You know, you're taking care of their blood sugars, you're taking care of their sodium level, you're looking at their, their breathing, making sure, their oxygen levels look good. Maybe they're having, maybe they have anemia as well. So you're kind of thinking about why they're anemic. So you're thinking about different systems together and synthesizing them together. And then you're consulting other subspecialties and bringing all that care kind of and synthesizing it together. And then you work a lot with, I think one aspect I didn't mention, you work a lot with multidisciplinary teams in medicine, especially in the hospital. So you're working with your nursing team, you're working with your case manager, you're working with your social workers. So you have a lot of your nutritionist, your physical therapist, your occupational therapist. So you have a lot of members of the care team that you kind of, so we do these multidisciplinary rounds in the hospital. And you sit together with your team and you kind of discuss kind of all these aspects of care for the patient. So there's a lot of multidisciplinary care. And then really one of the most sort of like the cornerstones of medicine is rounding. So if you listen to these like the people make fun of like try and like the comedies, the medical comedies, you'll hear about medicine doctors rounding all day like for 6 hours, and it just means rounding is just means seeing the patients that you have in the hospital. So usually if you're like a hospitalist or you're a resident or you're in the hospital and you have all these patients that are hospitalized, rounding means you look at their labs, you look at their imaging, you go and see them and talk to them and you make a plan for them. That's what rounding is, because you'll hear about rounding all the time. And it's usually done in a team manner, sort of. And it's usually done in the morning and you're seeing these patients and you're thinking about them and you're talking to them. And it's a really kind of fun, interactive thing because, you're thinking about their problems and making plans for them. But that's what rounding is. I feel like that's a cornerstone of medicine, of internal medicine, is the rounds. So, yeah.
So do you do rounding as like a subspecialist or just as an internist?
No, we round as subspecialists too.
Okay.
If you're in the hospital, then you rounds. In the clinic, you're just seeing patients in the clinic. They come in, you meet them in the clinic room and they leave. But if you are seeing patients who are hospitalized, which I see patients in the clinic and I see them in the hospital as well, so I have two different settings. So the rounding is strictly for patients who are admitted to the hospital. That's what it is. And yeah, there are subspecialist rounds as well. So it's a little bit different than the general medicine rounds because we're focused on just one system that we're focused on. But it's a great, learning environment when you're rounding. That's where a lot of the learning happens for the trainees. So, cool. Oh, we have like, I guess 20 minutes or so. I mean, we can just chat, whatever you guys want to ask. You asked great questions.
Sharon, that was.
Okay. Houston, do you mind telling us about your tattoo story? I'm like curious about it.
My tattoo thing? Well, the thing is that I share that because I say to my, when I'm doing trainings on biases, that we judge people by something of our lived experience or what we've been told. And so my mother said, tattoos, bad people. And so trying to stay away from the badness of it. But then when you mature and that doesn't make sense, mother. That absolutely doesn't make sense. For the fact that she never met anyone with a tattoo. So to label someone, that's where our biases come in. And I try to say, even on that small level, that if my mother was a hiring person, an agent, and you walked in with all your credentials, you were the type candidate for the position, and she saw you with a tattoo, she wouldn't hire you.
Yeah.
And how does that create barriers? Because of my biases, I'm going to be a barrier to your success. So we just have to be aware of our biases when we're in situations like that. My mom
Is there a
doesn't think
question there? Oh my gosh.
tattoos are bad, but back then, she was telling her kids, don't do that, don't do that. So yeah, but I do have a tattoo.